3, continuing Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, contents of the Gita summarized. So, before we begin, we will offer our obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text number 53. Shruti Vipratipanate Yadashtashyati Nischala Shamadho Achala Buddhis Tada Yogam Avapyasi. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in trance self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's purport. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. I'll read that again. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. Continuing, a Krishna conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. Om Aganatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Only to one who has unflinching faith in both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master are all imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Let's see. Yashadeve Parabhaktir Yashadeve Tataguru Tashyate Katitaryartha Prakashanti Mahatmanaha. So all the imports of Vedic knowledge can automatically or will automatically be revealed to the devotee who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master. By rendering devotional service unto the Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. These verses are coming from the Vedic literatures, but all verses of Vedic literature are not so easy to access and understand because they're very voluminous. Pardon me. And Krishna's already stated in text number 45 of the second chapter that we've read recently, that by all the Vedas, they deal mainly with the three modes of material nature, but Krishna advises Arjuna to rise above these modes of material nature and become established in the self. So this big difference is being made, a distinction is being made between conventional religious activities and transformational religious performances. The conventional religious activity, Krishna again, he explains all of this in Bhagavad Gita and further expands it in Srimad Bhagavatam. But the conventional religion is how to live in this world in a way which is not contrary to religious principles, but is engaging in sense gratification. The living entity comes to the material world due to the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, and he wants to enter into the forest of material enjoyment. I think we just read a little bit about that. When your intelligence is passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. So this we discussed last week, the forest of material enjoyment. So that's normally why we're here. And Krishna is so kind that he gives us prescriptions how to live in this world, which in a way which is not contrary to religious principles. So he doesn't want to see us hurt ourselves, just like a parent. They don't want to see a child hurt themselves. And we discussed this the other day, actually, that often in the youth stage of youth, we have our little children, and then they manifest themselves and they become so attractive, isn't it? Young children, they're very attractive. Who's not attracted to a young child? Even Srila Prabhupada, we saw, not even Srila Prabhupada, especially Srila Prabhupada, but he was in the renounced order of life. But when he was there in the house of Sally Agarwal, and the little boy was there, and he took his first steps towards Prabhupada when he was there in the lounge room. And Prabhupada was in ecstasy. Haribo, you're taking your first steps. And I'm sure Srila Prabhupada would have been saying a few Haribols and Hare Krishna. And in that way is a very joyful activity. So those early days are there, and we become captivated by the young children. But we find that the young children gradually grow and grow and grow, and we become concerned when they get to the teenage years, because at that stage, one's full-fledged desires for material enjoyment, for position, name, and fame and glory in the material world, in whatever way it may unfold or manifest, becomes very much the case, and we want to enter into this fully. So we enter into the forest of material enjoyment. Pardon me. So these flowery words of the Vedas are for us to function properly, these words of the Vedas, according to the modes of material nature, to make progress. So that is Krishna's plan. So we don't want to see our children, as they grow up, get too hurt or damaged by the material energy. So we try and encourage them. Don't do this activity because that won't be so good for you. I know you have to do, you're young, you're becoming a teenager, and you want to access your full potential for enjoyment in the material world, but please don't hurt yourself, because I can help guide you. Here we go. This is the parents. We want to guide our children, but did we listen to our parents? Not much, possibly. And hopefully the future generations listen a little more. Maybe there'll be a culture which will encourage them. They'll think, oh yeah, my mom and dad have really looked after me so well and so wonderfully and helped me to understand everything so far. So why shouldn't I listen to them when I enter into my teenage years? Pardon me. But as is the way of material life, we think we know everything. We've been able to tell Krishna we thought we knew what was good for ourselves. So what's the difficulty in telling your parents that we know what's good for ourselves? So the parents' duty then is to guide the children so that they don't hurt themselves too much. So for example, I'm just thinking of a young boy, instead of going to the clubs and beginning drinking and beginning chasing women or young girls all over the place and very rapidly getting into all sorts of difficulty, then we may encourage them to take up, maybe why don't you just look after a little animal? That would be nice. Why don't we get you a little horse, or a little horse, they usually get quite big, a little guinea pig, or whatever it may be. Or boys like to be girls too, like to be very energetic, but we may encourage them again, instead of getting into the vikarmic or the sinful activities of the world, which are readily available and displayed and presented and promoted everywhere. Instead of that, then maybe they're able to take up swimming and diving, and maybe they can go and surf. That may be something they can do, some sport or something. So that's more towards the mode of passion rather than the mode of ignorance. Passion's better than ignorance. Even better than passion is goodness. But we have to be very intelligent. We were discussing that earlier about we have to be able to observe what is actually going on. That is the Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada talks about Krishna consciousness, the divine consciousness. So Krishna consciousness means, Prabhupada said, first become conscious, then Krishna conscious. So we have to be conscious of what's actually realistic. And that will vary. Again, we mentioned that many times. Everything varies. Each child is different. Each parent is different. Each set of circumstances that we find ourselves in is different. So one has to learn how to apply the different ways of life and work with whoever it is to come through to the other side. So when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, so those Vedic things will deal mainly with the three modes of material nature, but we hear that there's the Upanishads are there, Upanishadic verses are sprinkled throughout the Vedas. The Mahabharata has Bhagavad Gita, the Gita Upanishad. The Upanishad means to bring closer. So the verses that bring you closer to real transformational religion, to go, that transformational religion will help us to transcend, go beyond the modes of material nature, the Ferris wheel of heavenly planets, falling from the heavenly planets to the earthly range, upper and lower, and going on and on like that. And it will introduce us to something that we're very happy to hear about. That instead of life only being contained within the material sphere, there is another sphere which lies beyond that ekapadi, tripad vibhuti, the threefold, or the three-part spiritual nature is the actual, what would we say? That's the real world. People say, get a job, you Hare Krishnas, and live in the real, get a job in the real world, be in the real world. And we say, no, thank you very much. We are, we may be functioning in this quote unquote real world, which is actually the material world. So the material world is not lasting, it is temporary. Everything in it is temporary. Yes, the houses will fall over in due course of time. The body that we exist in will fall over. Everything will fall over, from the greatest empire to the smallest establishment. Everything is defeated by time. So this is not the real world. So whether we can, and that, when we talk about the so-called real world, the material world, we're not just talking about the Earth planet. That's pretty much generally where we focus. Our focus is there. You know, we're focused on the Earth planet, but even we don't focus on the Earth planet that much. We focus on New Zealand. And if you're living in New Zealand, you don't focus on New Zealand much, really. You focus on Auckland if you're living in Auckland. And if you're living in Auckland, you don't focus on the whole of Auckland. You focus on Kumu, or you focus on Papatoi, or you focus on wherever in Auckland you're living. And then you don't focus on the whole of Kumu or the whole of Papatoi or the whole of wherever we Mount Roskill or wherever we happen to be living, you focus on the road that you live in, and you don't focus on that much. Actually, our consciousness has become so narrowed. We don't. People used to focus on the whole village that they live in. Now we don't even focus on the street or the road that we live in. We focus on. I'm looking out the window now, and I can see the fences, as I'm sure most or many of you can do. And we focus on what's within the boundary of our small fence and allotment. That's where our focus is. But do we do that? Do you actually focus on all of it? No, not a lot. I do a bit. I do the garden over there, and I fix this little thing out there in the garage, and I do this, and I focus on. And if you keep reducing the focus, you'll find that we focus on ourselves. That's where our main focus is. And our focus is on our enjoyment, our happiness, and our pleasure in this very limited sphere of a material body, in the eating, the sleeping, and the mating, and the defending the functions of the body, and the mind, some possibility of something. So just see how narrow our consciousness has become, and how overwhelming the material energy is, and how overwhelming the Vedic flowery words of the Vedic system. Elevation to higher planets, the performance of yagyas, the performance of rituals, the purification, and so on, to elevate you, to go to heaven. And so, wow, that sounds pretty amazing. You mean I can go to higher planets and life after death? And wow, and if I do this, I'll get this result. And if I act in a way, I'll be able to enjoy in that way. So that is the Vedas. And Krishna says that I want you to rise above this, Arjuna, and understand that by all the Vedas, I am to be known. Huh? What is that verse that Krishna says? By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta and the knower of the Vedas. For me, everything comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. I just had a bit of forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. So Krishna gives us this in Bhagavad Gita. Upanishad means come out from the three modes of material nature, and there's in the different sections of Vedas, there's like that. So it's to bring us out, to come to this broader understanding of what is actually religion. Ultimately, it's not simply the dharma, the performance of prescribed duties for elevation to higher levels. That is one understanding and one concept, one aspect, should I say, one aspect of religion. But transformational religion is that to become attain the divine consciousness, where we are Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na Soshati na Kanshati Samaha Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labade Param. Krishna says at the end of the Gita that one who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman. He's no longer disturbed by the hankering and lamenting. He's equally disposed to all living entities. From that position, we can come to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mad Bhaktim Lapate Param, being thus transcendently situated. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that this idea of transcendental situation, samadhi, samadhi is full absorption. To say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Vedanti tattva vidas tattvam yajganamadvayam Brahmati Paramatmati Bhagavanati Sajjate. So in the second chapter of Bhagavatam, then this verse is said that one who thus realizes the absolute truth in three phases of existence as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna. So we see that picture in Bhagavad Gita, that even the yogi who meditates, who uses the process of meditation to go inwards, not going outwards through the senses, withdrawing the senses and focusing within, when he gains the darshan of the Lord within the heart, then from there he understands, if he's able to, it's Prabhupada explains and the acharyas explain that it's a trap for the yogi. He can take the darshan of the Lord and think himself to be the Lord, but actually the real perfection of yoga is to understand both, that there is two. That was Madhvacharya, seen with two fingers. So two, there is the living entity and the supreme entity, the Atma and the Paramatma. So when we come to that position, then Mad Bhaktim Lapate Param. When we know that there is a supreme super soul and I am the small soul, what is the connection? What is the relationship between that Jivatma and the Paramatma? And that is the relationship of eternal servitorship. The highest perfection is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas. Enamored or disturbed or enamored, captivated. You could use all these words. And Prabhupada goes on, he says, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. So we don't really have a problem with that these days. We're not really stuck in the mode of goodness and performing pious activities to go to heavenly kingdoms. People are grubbing out. Grubbing out means grubbing in the earth, grubbing in the ground, trying to find some little bit of satisfaction in this material world. It's really not good. For a little bit of wicked, and I've served wicked and miserly men. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's bhajans, he's singing like that for a fraction of flickering happiness. And this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying this. And now, whatever number of years, 100 and so many years later, we see the rapid decline of sense gratification, of Kali Yuga, and the pursuit of sense gratification. It's accelerated so much. When Lord Chaitanya was present 500 years ago, Advaita Acharya was so disturbed by the condition that people were in the name of Vedic literature and following religious processes. They were spending lavishly for weddings and so on, and not being distracted from the ultimate goal of life. They were getting caught with the temporary goals of life. So he was so much seeing the need for Krishna to appear. And now 500 years later, wow, who could have conceived and believed that how rapidly the Kali Yuga is progressing? So we don't have the problem of engaging in engaged in promotion to heavenly kingdom, because that's mainly to follow these processes. You have to be in the mode of goodness to hear and then to access the required ingredients, etc., for such sacrifices, and then to be fixed in that vow and way of being so that you could do these things. In Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada goes on to say, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. Wow, this is so this is the yoga connection. We're interested to go within, and we can have that connection to Krishna and be directed from within by Krishna in a purified state of consciousness. Krishna will directly communicate with the devotee when he's pleased with the devotee by their transcendental loving service. So this is the way that Krishna reveals himself. He says that he's not revealed to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, he is always covered by his eternal creative potency, Yogamaya. So the deluded world does not know me, who am unborn and infallible. I reveal myself to my devotees. Krishna does that. So there is a process for understanding and connecting with the Supreme. So as we discussed the other week, not simply Brahman, that is also to be wonderfully appreciated, the impersonal feature of the Lord. Wow, what an amazing potency. Potency in the possessor thereof, there is no difference. In the Brahma Samhita, it is explained that Ekopyasora Jaitum Jagananda Kotim Yatshakshirasti Jagananda Chaya Yadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. The Supreme Personality of God, it is a fully undifferentiated entity. There's no difference between the Supreme Lord in his person and his energies. All the universes are contained within him and his work of creation. And he's simultaneously existent to the full extent in every one of the atoms, so that are scattered throughout the various universes. So this is the supreme position of Krishna, and that feature, impersonal feature. Then he's there, Paramatma, the Paramatma feature of the Lord, the compassion feature of the Lord to accompany the living entity. Who would do such a thing? Obviously, he's not affected. He's not affected, just like the lotus is able to be in the water. It's coming from the mud of the bottom of the pond, and it's situated there, and it's not touched by the water. It sits just out of the water. In a similar way, the Lord sits within the heart of every living entity, totally unaffected by the circumstances, and allows the living entity to interact with this energy of the Lord, provided for his pleasure. So that is the merciful incarnation of the Lord. And internally he's there, and externally the mercy continues in the form of the bona fide pure devotees of the Lord, who are the external manifestation of the super soul, Krishna, manifesting in that way. So yes, so these I mentioned earlier that these, when we talk of pure devotees and we talk of spiritual masters, we have to understand we are aspiring to become Krishna's devotees. We are aspiring to be Vaishnavas, aspiring, because these are very, very exalted entities to come to real Krishna consciousness. But we're not being despondent about that. We're not being unhappy about it, but trying to, again, keep proper focus on what is reality, distinguished from illusion. So Prabhupada's saying this, that this is all possible. He's trying to give, and you see purport after purport, he's giving us this information and distinguishing between following the Vedas, which is very good, but it's not the transcendence. And he said earlier that the neophytes have to follow so many things in the verse previously. I think, yes. So we see the great Acharya Sri Madhavendra Puri speaking, and he says, I'll quote that, and then he says, "O Lord, in my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you." So he's glorifying the Lord. He says, "All glory to you, my Lord. Bathing, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you." So he takes his bath and he's glorifying the Lord. He says, "O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me." So this is the exalted state that Srila Prabhupada's referring to. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. So he's showing how. But then Prabhupada, after that description by Madhavendra Puri, he says the Vedic rite and rituals are imperative for neophytes. So guess what we are? Neophytes. We are very neophyte. So again, this is the science. Srila Prabhupada said it is like a razor blade. When you use a sharp razor, you can give yourself a very nice shave if it's used properly. But if you're a little inattentive, then you can cut yourself very badly. So in a similar way, we can apply the process of Krishna consciousness. Now remember, it's a very sharp, penetrating blade. It cuts through all the Vedic ways of doing this and doing that, and brings us very quickly to the process of direct connection with Krishna. So we have to be very attentive to execute this properly, to get it. So guess what? Again, that's why you have to be really humble. It's like, wow, you're really going for it. Yes, this is a direct method, but first qualification, Trinada Pisinichana. Second qualification is you have to develop the attraction for the holy name. We have to be humble. There's a lot of stuff to be done. So, but it is possible. It is possible. So when one is in Prabhupada continues in that purport to text 52. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness, so again, we shouldn't think, well, that's me. We don't have to give respect to the forefathers, etc., because I'm fully in Krishna consciousness. We are trying to be in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service of the Lord. So we have to make sure that our service is transcendental, loving service. I don't know about you, but I know often I may do some service and I forget to put one very important ingredient there, just like cooking and serving and offering to Krishna. What Krishna really wants is the bhakti, yeah? Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati. If one offers me with love and devotion, love and devotion, forgot that ingredient. Krishna says, forget it. I don't want opulent offerings. I don't want haphazard offerings. I actually, all I want is a little bit of bhakti, just a little bit of love, of attraction, and care and concern and thought for me. That's what Krishna really wants to see. So fully in Krishna and is engaged in his transcendental loving service. So we've got to bring some love to this and transcending the modes of nature and being loving. Unless we transcend the modes of nature, we'll be in passion and ignorance and we won't have access to love. Therefore, the service will be very mixed. Karma Mishra Bhakti. Or Gyan Mishra Bhakti. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. So again, back to that verse, it says, by rendering service to the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, one immediately acquires this cosmos knowledge detachment. But there's a certain quality to the service, there's a certain quality to our chanting. So if we're finding that we're not getting the spontaneous tears, melting heart, and loving attraction and loving dealings with everyone in our lives, seeing and so on, there's so many, and that's going to be asked by Arjuna. He's going to ask this. He says in the next verse, actually I won't go into, but he's asking, how does a person who's got this consciousness, who's merged in transcendence, how does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? What does he do? He wants to know, how will I understand this? And Krishna will go on to explain how this personality acts. So again, we don't get ahead of ourselves, but we see the importance of this mood of executing devotional service and gradually elevating the process so that we can come to the platform of transcendence. So, in the end of that purport about Madhavendra Puri, that's text number 52, Prabhupada says, and similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in the rituals, etc., then he is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. So there's so many engagements in the world, but all of the engagements that we get involved in should bring us to this connection with Krishna. Otherwise, Shramadeva Kevalam is simply a useless waste of time and endeavor. So we can learn that process, how to dovetail all of our activities, our family lives, our social life, our material life of earning an income, how to make it so that it's all connected to Krishna. So that is the very wonderful process that Srila Prabhupada gave us. And he never discriminated. Jayananda Prabhu was driving his taxi, and Prabhupada was so appreciative that he was giving Lakshmi to help establish Krishna consciousness. At the same time, he was also developing his Krishna consciousness by hearing from Prabhupada and serving the devotees and so on and so forth. So whatever our situation, it changes throughout our lives, and our situation in the world, as it changes, then we can organize our life in such a way that we cannot forget Krishna for a moment. 24 hours a day, we can, and it is possible. It can be done. I'm talking to myself here. There's a chance that I might be able to do that someday, and we do better sometimes than others, as you, I'm sure, have experienced. So, okay. So I'm thinking that, what time is it? It's quite early, but that's good. It's good when we don't speak too long. I don't know if we've got anyone that wants to make any comment. If you do have any comment or reflection, you can use that little chat box and just pop it in there, and then I'll see it. I should have mentioned it earlier as usual, but not to worry. So you can, if you have any reflection or a question, feel free, you can do. So when your mind is no longer attracted to, disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, which are pretty alluring, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Krishna. Okay, so text number 54 is coming up, and that is that classic question where Arjuna says, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? Good question, that one. Helps us to gain perspective. How does such a person speak? What kind of language? How do they conduct themselves? And we'll hear all about that in our next verse. So we're going to end at that point. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Ananta Koda Krishna Brinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi.